All right, let's talk about the summer of 1999. You've got two neighbors, both armed with nuclear weapons, deciding to go to war in what is, without a doubt, one of the most hostile environments on the entire planet. We're talking about the Kargil conflict, a truly brutal, high-stakes war fought, quite literally, on the roof of the world. So let's get right into it.
So before we get into the who, what, and why, you've really got to picture the where. The setting for this war is it's insane. This isn't your typical battlefields. We're talking about fighting on jagged Himalayan peaks, where the air is so thin it just drains the life out of you. The weather can kill you in an instant, and honestly, just surviving up there is a victory in itself. This environment wasn't just a background detail, you know? It was a major player in the war, shaping every single decision, every battle, and every life lot.
Okay, so here's the twist. The really wild part of this story is that this all-out war exploded right after a moment of, well, unprecedented hope. Seriously, for a little while there, it looked like India and Pakistan were actually on the verge of a real, lasting peace. And I mean it. Something truly remarkable happened just months before the shooting started. The Indian Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, actually took this historic bus trip over to Lahore, Pakistan. It was a huge deal. He met with his counterpart, Nawaz Sharif, and they signed what's known as the Lahore Declaration. This was a landmark agreement, basically a promise to talk things out, not fight them out. And for a hot second, everyone, not just in the region, but around the world, thought, wow, maybe this is it. Maybe peace is actually possible. But that hope, it didn't last long at all. I mean, look at this timeline. It's just staggering. While the ink on that peace treaty was barely dry, something else was happening in secret. Pakistani forces were quietly creeping across the line of control. That's the unofficial border that snakes through Kashmir. By May, what started as whispers from a few local shepherds became a terrifying reality. This wasn't a small incursion, it was a massive infiltration. Just like that, the spirit of Lahore was completely shattered.
So what was actually going on up there in the mountains? Let's be crystal clear. This was no small border skirmish. This was a full-blown, carefully planned military operation designed to grab strategic high ground deep inside Indian-held territory. And let's just stop and think about this number for a second. 16,000 feet. To give you some perspective, that is way higher than any peak in the Rocky Mountains. And get this, that was the average altitude they were fighting at. At that height, your body is literally shutting down. Just walking a few steps feels like running a marathon. And the cold, it's a constant, brutal enemy that never, ever lets up. The Pakistani plan was codenamed Operation Badr, and you have to admit, it was audacious. It was also strategically brilliant. By sneaking in and taking over 130 of these high-altitude Indian posts, they got a bird's-eye view of this critical road below, National Highway 1. Now, this highway wasn't just any road. It was the absolute lifeline for all Indian troops stationed further north in the region. If you control the heights overlooking that highway, you can cut it off. And if you cut it off, you essentially put the entire Indian military presence there in a chokehold. And I want to be really clear about something. This wasn't some small band of insurgents. We're talking about an estimated 5,000 troops. These guys were professional soldiers, well-equipped, well-supplied from the Pakistani army and paramilitary units. They had pushed deep into Indian territory, and they were digging in, setting up fortified positions. They weren't there for a raid. They were there to stay. Now, the official story from Pakistan at the beginning, they claimed they had nothing to do with it. They said these were just independent Kashmiri freedom fighters. But you know, the truth has a way of coming out. The evidence on the ground, from captured documents, military-grade equipment, and eventually even from admissions by Pakistani leaders, it all pointed to one undeniable fact. These weren't random militants. These were regular soldiers, mostly from Pakistan's own Northern Light Infantry. So, faced with this massive, strategic infiltration deep inside its territory, what was India going to do? Well, its response had to be just as massive, and it had to be decisive. They called it Operation Vijay, which translates to Operation Victory. And when I say massive, I mean it. India mobilized nearly 200,000 troops and rushed them to the region. Now, to be fair, only about 30,000 of them would be involved in the direct fighting in the Kargil area, but moving that many soldiers sent an unmistakable message to Pakistan and the world. India was not treating this like a minor skirmish. They were treating it like an invasion. India's game plan was pretty methodical. It was essentially a four-step process. First up, containment. They had to surround the Pakistani positions and cut off all their supply lines from back across the border. Step 2, call in the air power.
the Indian Air Force launched Operation Safed Sagar, using jets and helicopters to bomb the heck out of those dug-in enemy bunkers. And then came Step 3, the most brutal part of the entire war, sending infantry soldiers to physically climb and assault those fortified peaks. I mean, can you imagine charging uphill in thin air against an enemy firing down on you? It was just nightmarish. All of this was for the final goal, Step 4. Clear those heights and make that critical highway safe again. Now, there were so many intense battles fought during this war, but one really stood out, the Battle for Tiger Hill. This peak was one of the highest, most strategically important positions, and taking it back became a national obsession. The fighting was incredibly fierce, just brutal close-quarters combat. And because parts of it were actually being reported on Indian television, the whole country was watching. It became this powerful symbol of the entire war. After some of the toughest fighting you can imagine, Indian troops finally recaptured it on July 8th.
And of course, the human cost of these battles was just immense. But in the middle of all that horror, you also get these incredible stories of heroism. Take Captain Vikram Batra. After his unit captured a critical peak, his success signal over the radio was "Ye dil mange more," which means "this heart wants more." It was actually a popular advertising slogan for a soda at the time, and it just perfectly captured the incredible courage of the soldiers. Tragically, Captain Batra was killed later in the war while trying to save another soldier's life. He was awarded India's highest medal for bravery, the Paramveer Chakra, after his death. But while all this brutal fighting was happening on the frozen peaks, there was another battle going on. This one was fought by diplomats in quiet rooms, thousands of miles away. And the whole world was watching them, holding its breath, because of one terrifying fact. And here it is. This is why everyone was so scared. Both India and Pakistan had literally just become official nuclear powers the year before in 1998. That made the Kargil conflict the first ever hot war fought between two countries that openly had the bomb. The big fear, the one that kept everyone up at night, was that this war, fought with rifles and artillery in the mountains, could somehow escalate into a full-blown nuclear exchange. That possibility was absolutely terrifying and very real.
So the international community, especially the United States, started putting immense pressure on Pakistan to back down. President Bill Clinton had a pretty blunt conversation with Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. He basically laid it out. You have to pull your troops back to your side of the line of control, now. On the 4th of July, of all days, Sharif agreed, and that was pretty much the beginning of the end for the fight. So by the end of July, specifically July 26th, India was able to declare Operation Vijaya a complete success. The fighting was over. But even though the war itself was relatively short, it cast a really long, dark shadow over the entire region. Let's talk about the human cost, because it was incredibly high on both sides. India's official numbers list 527 of their soldiers killed. Now, Pakistan's numbers, that's where things get complicated. Officially, back then, they said around 450 of their soldiers died. But years down the line, Nawaz Sharif himself, the guy who was prime minister during the war, claimed that the real number was over 4,000. That massive difference tells you everything you need to know about how controversial and politically charged this war still is inside Pakistan. So when the dust settled, the results were pretty clear. On the military front, India won. They successfully kicked out all the intruders and took back all their territory. Diplomatically, India also scored a big win. By making the deliberate choice not to cross the line of control themselves, they were seen as the responsible power, showing a lot of restraint. For Pakistan, though, the war was an absolute disaster. It left the country isolated on the world stage and created chaos at home. In fact, the political fallout was so bad that a few months later, the general who planned the Kargil invasion, Pervez Musharraf, overthrew the government in a military coup. So what's the lasting legacy of Kargil? Well, on one hand, it was a clear military victory for India. It proved that the line of control was not to be messed with. But on the other hand, the war revealed something much more frightening. It showed the world that two nuclear-armed states could and would still fight a conventional war. And that leads us to the big, unsettling question that still hangs over South Asia today. By proving that conventional war was still on the table, did Kargil basically rig up a permanent nuclear tripwire on the subcontinent? A line that, if crossed again, could lead to the unthinkable.